Digital Dissection, a nerd podcast, can at times contain adult language and themes. It is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Digital Dissection podcast, where we take a closer and possibly unnecessary look at our favorite properties, creators, and topics. We are your humble hosts, Joe and Mark, two pop culture nerds dedicated to telling entertainment history before it's forgotten too soon. Join us on Facebook, Twitter, and our blog for more information on the show. We also love to hear from you. Write us at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get to dissecting. Joe, what's your relationship with sci-fi been like?
Sometimes very, very good, very, very comforting. And other times I had to be a secret love so that no one would know just how entwined I was with it. And that time was high school. We hit it a little bit. And now it's struck back with a vengeance ever since.
So what you're trying to say is science fiction for you was el amor prohibido, otherwise known as the love that is forbidden.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, it was definitely one of those things where, like, my friend's like, we know he's nerdy, but maybe he's not as nerdy as we thought before we started hanging out with him, or maybe after hanging out with him, maybe he's not as nerdy as we thought before. He seems kind of cool, but really, they just weren't allowed into my bedroom where my toys were, and I never suggested movies or TV to watch. Like, I'll just go along with everyone else wants. It'll be great.
I think I can understand that journey a little bit. Mostly because I suppressed a lot of that too growing up, as we've kind of covered in the first season. We talked about this in our journeys with nerdity and how we kind of came to be. And I have to say that my relationship with Doctor Who is oddly similar, even now. I mean, I don't talk about this with anybody.
Well, sometimes it's the fan base, sometimes it's the content. Sometimes it's a bit of both are the reasons why you don't talk too much about them. And I think like Doctor Who is fun. I do enjoy the Doctor Who quite a bit, but at the same time there are also some stuff that's just so terribly British that I just don't understand it.
Very true. I think the biggest thing for me is that I feel like grammatically it's incorrect. I feel like it should be Doctor Whom.
I think it is supposed to. Like, I think if you actually use the language the right way, it should be Doctor Whom.
Oh, yes. We're busting out nerdity in a lot of different ways tonight. But yes, we're here to talk about Doctor Who. Specifically, though, the reboot of the series that occurred in 2005, which, Joe, once again, we're reminded of just how old we really are because that's 17 years ago.
And to think the series is still going since the reboot pretty solidly, which is very, very impressive that it came back. I know there's some like hardcore Doctor Who fans that will say that it's been around consistently longer than any other like major sci-fi series or franchise, and it predates both Star Wars and Star Trek. But I mean, I would argue that Star Trek's hiatus was not nearly as long as Doctor Who's, or actually, it was the hiatus as long. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I don't know. Star Trek had a lot more spin-off and other series that went for a very long time, and I'd argue, at least from the American audience standpoint, did not hit as many dry stories as Doctor Who did over the years.
Unfortunately, what we're here to do today, not going to talk about the entirety of the series.
No, because God, no, that's too long.
No, ain't nobody got time for that. What we're going to do...
Not one episode.
Yeah, not in one episode. We're going to talk specifically about the series, so specifically Series 1, that kicked off this reboot. But before we get to that, we are going to take you on a quick trip. We're going to hop into the TARDIS.
Quick trip?
Quick trip.
Got excited because of a gas station chain.
Yes, Wisconsin's pride of gas station convenience stores. Quick Trip, not a sponsor. No.
But we wish, hopeful. It won't happen. But,
Yeah.
if you're listening, even though you're not, we love you.
Yeah.
Yes, down the Doctor Who memory lane, if you will. And to be less timey-wimey, we will kind of start at the beginning and quickly trek through to where we got to in 2005.
Yeah, just some quick data facts on this one. If you haven't heard of Doctor Who before, it is a science fiction TV program with two M's and an E on the end by BBC. It actually originally aired from 1963 to 1989. So that first initial run was actually pretty long. And yeah, surprisingly, Joe, in 1963, there were some other TV programs that came out. And I'm going to read these off to you because, Joe, you're going to remember pretty much all of them, okay? These shows premiered in 1963 as well.
You may be giving me more stock than I'm worth, but go for it. Let's do this.
Yes, we have The Patty Duke Show, starring Patty Duke.
Oh, who could forget the Patty Duke Show?
Yes, we have The Danny Kaye Show.
Oh, Danny Kaye. I know him solely because of National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. So, yes, I do know that one.
And we have Suspense Theater in color.
Ooh. In Technicolor, no doubt, I'm sure.
Yes. Now, these ones you may actually remember. We have General Hospital and
there we go.
Let's Make a Deal. Let's Make a Deal came out the same year.
All right. Yeah, those two we know. I mean, General Hospital, I think that juggernaut's been going. Even didn't Jensen Ackles get a start on General Hospital?
I think he did. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was.
Mm-hmm.
He was a soap opera star for a little bit.
Yeah, our Supernatural star, and yeah, he's getting a spinoff. So I mean, he's producing the spinoff, so of course he's getting it. But yeah, and then Let's Make a Deal. Back in with Wayne Brady, I think still, and that man's an entertainer. Hell yeah. But yeah, two I heard of at least, and again, others solely through that. But no, actually, that's great because now I understand the National Lampoon's reference with Danny Kaye. It makes sense now.
I was going to say, every time I meet up with friends, especially from college and high school, we're talking about Patty Duke. God damn it. But for the facts on Doctor Who, let's just really quickly. The original series was written by Sidney Newman, C.E. Weber, and Donald Wilson. And it was a combination of creative and writing at this point, with Sidney Newman coming up with the original concept, and then Wilson and Weber kind of got handed this, okay, you guys need to figure out what the actual format's going to be and put pen to paper for us here. So that was the original creative team.
And if you're unfamiliar with Sidney Newman, this is the person who created the Avengers. Not the Marvel Avengers, but the British serial The Avengers, which also did try and make a reboot there around the 2005 area, I believe, with Uma Thurman as one of the Avengers.
And Voldemort, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that was the other guy, yeah. So, hell of a team there. Both of them were villains in other movies, but, it's Uma, Jerry. Uma. Like, you can't keep her down.
You know how many times I've seen the Avengers, like, box set in a bargain bin, and I look at that and I'm like, it's like, this is not the Avengers that I remember. This is like literally Ralph Fiennes and Uma Thurman, in this movie that frankly I've never seen. And Sir Sean Connery was also in that.
Why not? I could just think like this was just one of those attempts at revivals. Again, it was like rampant in the 2000s. That was very much the era of rebooting and getting that process going. Because before that, it was just all about sequels. And now it's like, wait a second. Maybe the sequels were wrong. If we just revamp the original idea, I'm sure that'll work. And we are still living in that wake, as every Spider-Man fan knows. But, Avengers was not panning out as successfully, I would say at least globally, as Doctor Who's made his comeback.
So Doctor Who went through kind of a different journey at this point in time. Like near the end of this original run, there had been some rumors by people online and just in general saying that the BBC potentially got embarrassed by the concept near the end. Like it was so convoluted in their eyes. There's so much mythos going on here, and so much had changed over the course of 25 years, 26 years at that point.
Yeah.
How do you make sense of it all? And what ended up happening was this attempt at a made-for-TV movie which was supposed to act as like a backdoor reboot for the series in 1996. And it was actually an American-led effort to the point where it's like, yeah. And it's like, yeah, let's just try and do this and see what happens. As far as reception goes, like people actually thought it was a decent film, right?
Yeah.
At least
You can say that.
I mean, at least among some British circles. And the Americas were like, what is this?
The fuck is this? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
I can't jack off to this. What's going on here?
No. I mean, Will Sasso was there, if you're a Mad TV fan. Or his vines where he'd make lemons come out of his mouth. Hilarious. Not knocking him at all. That was legitimately funny. But it was just weird. Like, it was, again, like, kind of, I think, like, there's just it felt like almost like fan fiction-y, where it didn't seem like you had the most professional writers behind it. Like, I remember seeing it because of I got into Doctor Who later, and we can talk about that at a further point in the podcast. But I ended up trying to backtrack and watch a few things, and I watched this movie.
Fucking roast you so hard.
Oh, that's fine, you do that. But I watched this movie, and one of the first things you do is, well, you do get, I think it's Sylvester McCoy, who's the Seventh Doctor, starts off in this movie. So that was kind of nice for the British fans. They've got a lead in here of who this person is. Well, I mean, it's not who it is, but like, yeah, it's like, hey, we're continuing the same story. And for the Americans, okay, here's this time-traveling alien, fantastic. And then something happens, and he loses his memory, and like he wakes up from it, and he just goes, "Who am I?" And there's lightning flashing in the background. It's like, oh, you're Doctor Who. I get it now. It's just like, oh, this is the writing. This is the best we could think of, Fox. I thought we were better.
Americans are all like, who the fuck is this guy on my TV right now, huh? And then people in the UK, they're like doing the Leo DiCaprio point. They're like pointing at the TV like,
ooh,
I know that bloke. I know who that is. It's like, hey, honey, come in here now. Look who that is. You know, like they were all excited about it. Like seriously, the UK reviews for this were actually quite positive because they're like, holy shit, they're actually paying homage to the previous series, and they are still trying to do something new, which people said was well acted, believe it or not.
Okay.
So, hey, whatever. I'm not judging it. That's fine.
Yeah.
However, didn't really take off. And so we're left with a failed reboot, otherwise known as Blue Balls.
Yeah. I mean, this is a case where, like, it's not dread to me. Like, the grosses definitely would have been too low, and I'd be like, there's a reason why the grosses were too low. This was not engaging especially when, like, again, like, when presented to a U.S. audience, like, we had no fucking clue what was going on for the most part. There'd just be, like, the patch of people who knew of this, to the United States, an obscure science fiction show from across the pond. And I'm sure they got really excited about it, but the rest of us, they hear that thing on Fox, like, I don't know. I mean, even like seeing Sylvester McCoy in his original Doctor Who get-up from the 80s is just like, well, this guy's supposed to save the day? I don't think so. Nah.
It's like, where's the muscles? Where's all the bulging in the veins? I need to see more. We needed just to see something more machine gunny, I guess, in America at that point in time. But
I mean, the villain was very, their version of the Master was budget movie Terminator-ish, from what I can recall. But I mean, looking at that as like a, like you said, like a spiritual reboot to get the franchise going. I don't think, did Doctor Who ever really go away? Because I thought they kept doing radio serials for quite a while, even though he'd been done on TV.
Yeah, but when we're talking about like live action types of things, we're not really in that realm or that space. And some of the projects that occurred between the movie and then the revival were technically considered at one point to be canonish, and then were kind of put on the side in the same realm that Star Wars Legends from like the old stories, right?
Yeah.
from long ago.
Yes.
Kind of how they got shelved.
Now
Same type of idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sacred texts. Yeah. Which, by the way, before we move away from the TV movie, so people actually thought Paul McGann did a really good job in his version of the Doctor, and Eric Roberts played the Master, and people thought that Eric Roberts even did a decent job. So it's a little bit of a shame to see that Eric Roberts once again gets shit on, but hey, he's used to it at this point, right? He's used to being knee deep in it. So, but
And
yeah,
if you were in the same mindset of most Americans who saw this for the first time, wondering yourself, who is this Doctor Whom, and what are they all about? Well, we should probably give you a little bit of background on the character a bit first.
but before we get to the character, I do
Oh,
want to
okay.
point out, just before this reboot began, the BBC was once again embarrassed, but for a different reason. That's because they lost like a third of the fucking series.
I think we just don't know what happened to it.
They used to have this process of basically renting out the copies of the shows that they had, and they would give them to like other countries to broadcast, right? And sometimes this involved giving away the original copies to people.
Oh God.
And at one point, they kept the duplicates in this like library type thing. But then they fucked up and destroyed the copies based on their old standards and practices. So they lost seriously like a third of the goddamn series because like, oh, should we be keeping this? Sounds like, you bollocks out of your mind. Fucking throw that away. I don't want that in here. And then and they just got rid of it. Fucking let it go. I just don't get it.
I was just trying to think of a third British dialect to throw into your Michael Caine and limey gent that you had over there.
Yeah, some bloke on the floor with his wearing knee pads, just cleaning shit out.
Or the guy who's in charge and has money and got a clue doesn't know what's going on. Hello there. I say, did you find those episodes of The Doctor anywhere? Oh, you haven't? Okay then. Let's maybe just put some Jimmy Savile up. Oh wait, we can't do that anymore, can we? He was didn't.
Oh no, we can't do that anymore.
No, we can't do that.
He maybe kind of touched a lot of people in bad, naughty ways.
Oh, let's just run Parliament live for a while and see if anyone notices.
Yes, put the kettle on. We're changing the subject.
And done with the accents. All right.
No, we're not done. We are not fucking done at all. but we are going to get into, as you mentioned, what the hell is this Doctor Who, gentleman?
Yeah.
Joe, do you want to take first crack at what the hell Doctor Who is?
So, strictly from the mythos standpoint, he is a member of a race known as the Time Lords. Their races are surrounded around the idea that they can time travel. They do so with different machines, and their machines are so advanced that they can take the form of basically anything you want them to look like. And when you step into them, no matter the apparent size of them, they are much larger on the inside. And so they have basically made their way gallivanting through the ages and solving problems. And they also have this unique ability. As long as they aren't seriously injured, meaning if they were shot, their body, they would die. However, their body would regenerate and come back, changing the appearance of the individual, however, retaining the memories of the previous. So they would have basically a whole new personality, remember everything they did before, and could go on living a whole new life, so that they could live for literal generations. And I do say, when I say not seriously wounded, it's just a flesh wound or just a gunshot. If their head was severed, they could no longer regenerate.
If you're watching the video program here, I'm laughing, almost losing my mind over here because I'm thinking about this meme I saw where it says that British people, or British people, as the meme says, downplay everything. So what I'm thinking of here is the doctor's mortally wounded. He's like, hey, what's this then? What's all this? Am I dying? And it's another one's I appear I have deceased, or I'm in the process of deceasing. I require medical attention and aid.
Never mind. I've grown quite tired of living. Just let the process take place then.
Yes, just let what's going to happen naturally happen. Just let it take over. I'm going to sit this one out.
Yeah, so from the species standpoint, it is a fun science fiction thing, but it's brilliant from a studio standpoint, because that could mean that if you ever have an actor decide, I no longer want to do the part, I want to move on and do other things, or perhaps you no longer like the actor playing your lead and you wish to not re-sign him, you can kill him off and just replace him with someone else because he would just regenerate and change anyway. So it is both fun science fiction and good reality. And like other series have kind of copied this to a fault. In Star Trek, you do get the Trills, who basically it's just a more or less a parasite that just kind of goes on to goes into other beings and just keeps bringing memories from all of the others. So as long as the parasite survives, all of the wealth of knowledge it's acquired also survives. So that is the Americanized version of this. But yeah, that's more or less the skinny on Doctor Who. Regenerating time-traveling alien from a race of time-traveling aliens, and makes some, friends and enemies along the way.
Now, I do want to make 2 corrections in what you just said. It's actually he or her
Sure. Yes.
that could turn into
true.
the Doctor, and there's been 14 to this point in time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
14
Yes.
Doctors.
14. And, I mean, it's not really a spoiler at this point because I think it's technically 15, but 15 is just 10 all over again.
It's about to be 15-ish. Wow, I really can't turn this off. Sometimes it just takes over. It's like a spirit.
Would that be 15? Would it be 16-ish? Because there was the War Doctor at one point.
I think the War. Okay,
He's
here
like
we
a
go.
weird. Yeah. Okay, we need to focus on the plan at hand. We're going
sticking
back
to
to 2005.
Yes.
Yes. But the
Now,
War Doctor was only there because 2005 wouldn't do anything again anyway. But yeah.
But as far as the regeneration process goes, we also need to correct that a little bit because the previous Doctor doesn't always remember or have intimate knowledge of the one before it. So when they regenerate, it's not like you're just reloading from a previous saved game. Like you're getting a whole new person, gets to interpret the role their own way. And so it's familiar, yet fresh.
Yes, it is interesting that way too because I don't know. I don't know if that's just because sometimes it's convenient for writing like that or why. Because I mean there are times when in Matt Smith's Doctor blatantly says memories from things that happened between David Tennant going and him coming in that we didn't see on TV, and he says they're blatant memories that he still has. So it comes and goes as the writing needs it.
Yeah, I mean it's not to the point though where you're truly living through the same character though.
No.
It's
That's
enough.
yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I should make sure that is a definitely, like you said, it's a definite thing. Every time the Doctor regenerates, it is a brand new personality, a whole new person. So even if they have the memories from before or don't, depending on what they need, completely different person. And because every Doctor does not like dying, by the way, all of them do not look forward to the event. And everyone's like, "Oh, don't worry, I'll be back in no time and in a jiffy." It's like, no, they definitely don't like it. Not a fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always tragic. And the good news is that yes, they're hard scenes to watch, okay? Like this isn't a spoiler thing either cuz for anyone who's watched the series or even just kind of maybe this is like a pop culture blind spot for you. I mean, the actors change. So at some point you're going to have to see what happens. And I knew a little bit of this coming into the property because I didn't actually watch it when it first came out. I discovered it maybe about 6 years later, 2011, 2010, in that area. Yeah. And so I was already involved with this knowing who David Tennant was, right? And so it was a little bit different for me. But ultimately, the show gets rebooted, as we mentioned, after a 16-year hiatus.
Yes.
So 2005 kicks off this new creative process, this new show format. Still don't get why the BBC is embarrassed with this massively large property that nerds love. But either way, they decided this guy named Russell T Davies, okay, he's been bothering us literally 4 years. I'm not saying 4 as in 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, literally for
several.
The entire time it's off the air. This dude's bothering people, trying to get them to put it back on the air. And at this point in time, Russell T Davies wasn't like a household name or anything, and he still might not be to the right people. but at this point in time, he was an up and coming writer in the UK, and he had many successful shows. One of them that people are probably the most familiar with is Queer as Folk, which still to this day is a celebrated show. And he had actually originally written a treatment for Doctor Who that was rejected. At this point, he was just like considered a graduated fan, right? It gets shot down by producers back in like 1987, I want to say. So during the original run. And as in an odd twist of fate, his idea for a show would end up being repurposed into an episode in that 2005 run. So pretty cool stuff. It's always I'm always happy to see fans turn their talents into something for the properties that they love. And in this case, it's kind of like when David Tennant was like a career fan of Doctor Who, and then he lands the lead role.
God, sorry. Yes.
Yeah, it feels the same. It really does.
Yeah, it does. So he finally gets the BBC to listen to him, and we get this new show in 2005. So let's look at, I guess, like the runners of this show. So we want a new Doctor. We want a fresh start. We're not gonna do what we did before and have the previous Doctor come on, have him get axed and killed off and regenerate a new Doctor. Instead, we get hit with a new Doctor right away. And this is played by Christopher Eccleston. And if you are not familiar with him, and you've watched movies we've told you about before, specifically Gone in 60 Seconds, he is Raymond Calitri. Something tearing at the soft underbelly of our town.
He runs all the Dark Ponies.
That's the one, yeah. Yes. He runs all the Dark Ponies, all that fun stuff. But yeah, so great actor, established in the UK. He also, who was he in G.I. Joe? He was Despero.
Was he Destro?
Yeah. Destro. Yeah, Despero is the DC villain with an eye. But yeah, he was Destro through that movie. It was indeed a film.
I love how the line he says in Gone in 60 Seconds when he first meets Nick Cage, and he goes, I tried to learn your customs and learn your ways, but this baseball is so bleeding boring. And I'm like, man, God damn it, he's right. He's not a line, but he's right. And seriously, up to this point in time, I really did only know him for some of the properties that you mentioned, because there was 28 Days Later, which he was, one of the main antagonists in that movie, and then he would end up being in Thor: The Dark World years later. Yep. So this is like, that's past this point. But for me, I'd always known him as a villain or a person of low moral fiber. So, which
again, very contrast to who he is in this particular series. But yeah. So great job, and a smooth new look as far as Doctors are concerned, because when you look at the Doctor traditionally through the years, bit of an awkward dresser, and that was kind of part of the character, is that they had this quirky look about them, that they were almost in their own cases, in some cases, just a person out of time. And either like our first Doctor dressed old-timey, and then after that, they were attaching celery to their coats, they were doing mile-long scarves, so just all sorts of crazy.
See, and I was exactly going to say that. I go, Joe, is it just possible that Doctor is before his time or outside of his time? Like what? Because, maybe that is the fashion where he's from or where he's traveled and picked it up along the way, patchwork style. But
but now we get a man in nice dark denim, a V-neck jumper, and a smooth as heck leather jacket.
I mean, who didn't have like a lambskin leather jacket back in like the early 2000s? I sported one.
Oh yeah, we were all there.
It got wet once, and it was rendered unusable after that point. But hey, that's
it was there.
So Joe, what ends up being good about Eccleston isn't just the fact that he's a good actor. We've already talked about some examples of where we liked him, but bringing him in comes along with kind of letting go of some of the, let's call it the troublesome details from the previous timelines that Doctor Who established. And I'm not saying it's bad stuff. I'm just saying it's easier to start over with someone who's a little more inviting And we really just keep the things that I think people were likely to recognize about the Doctor anyway.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the things like his favorite every tool, multi-tool, the sonic screwdriver. We have the TARDIS phone booth, the time and relative dimensions and space.
We all have a good
machine.
acronym.
Yes. And yeah, and I think that makes it a lot easier to secure new audiences, welcome in the old ones, or the more experienced ones, not
Absolutely.
to insult the age. so I think it's a really good decision to do it that way. Not to mention, Eccleston's Doctor is full of charisma. The dude is the most charismatic motherfucker I've ever seen.
I would absolutely and wholeheartedly agree with that. He's charismatic, and like the optimism that his character has is phenomenal, because that is one thing that I will, as someone who like Star Trek is like my pinnacle of science fiction, is my favorite. But one thing that this series, especially what Eccleston did, that will always get me is how he'll meet characters. And for the most part, there's only one exception that I can think of in the series, is he's going to meet characters. And these are things that are daunting and terrifying to the humans who are involved in whatever shenanigans going on, or even the other aliens that are there. And he never looks at them and is afraid of them. He always sees it as a new opportunity, or that we have so much to learn and that it's exciting when you meet something new. And that is something that is very lost in a lot of people, where we become suspicious of something we don't understand, or we're afraid of something we don't understand. And this character gets excited about things he doesn't understand. With, again, he, as in like Eccleston, because again, we've said that Time Lords, when they regenerate, don't always come back the same gender or biological sex that they were before. So with Eccleston's character specifically, the amount of just sheer optimism he has towards almost everything in that series was flat out infectious.
Yeah, I mean, it is a good point that you bring up, because right away, the Doctor is obviously meant to draw you in. He's the main character of the show for the most part, right? And what Doctor Who is kind of built on as a core function is that the Doctor always has companions that join him in his travels, which takes form in the role of Rose Tyler, played by Billie Piper. And so when you see her, she's this like 19-year-old girl. She's observing these crazy events that unfold. And of course, our leather jacket clad Doctor is, running around just spinning her up in his web.
And I mean, you just forget all about your boyfriend, Ricky, at the time.
Oh, poor Ricky.
Which also, for those of you who know, that is an inside joke that we just called him Ricky. Which, Mark, I know I am much more familiar with this than you. Are you aware of the whole Ricky Mickey thing?
So it's not coming immediately to me. The only other time I've seen this kid was in Star Trek Into Darkness, where he helps blow up the archives.
Does help do the blowy uppy thing.
I do not know.
But yeah,
I do not know.
So when you first, right off the bat, when you first meet the Doctor and he meets Rose in the first episode of this, Rose, who, a slight discredit to the character is that she is always kind of like I don't know, almost teenage, like hormone lovesick throughout the series, which she does that wanes as the series goes on. But how she is in this first series with Eccleston is that she has a boyfriend named Mickey, and things are kind of, I don't know, they're okay. Like probably like a lull or a low point in the relationship. And then the Doctor sweeps in. He's exciting. He's charismatic. He's got this incredible life. So Rose is swept off of her feet by the whole thing. Mickey gets jealous, of course, and the Doctor calls him Ricky. For quite a while.
That's
right. And then he doesn't say anything. Eventually he's like, my name's Mickey. And the Doctor's like, no, it's Ricky. Yeah. And Mickey goes, I'm pretty sure I know my own name. And Eccleston looks him dead in the eye and says, pretty sure? You should be wholly sure that you know your own name. It's Ricky.
which is I do remember this. Yeah, sorry, it just didn't
Yep.
come right to mind. But the stuff
Yes.
about the doctor and him, the relationship is hilarious because it reminds me
Hmm.
of what happens with Sherlock and the police. In the Benedict Cumberbatch version,
Hmm.
it's kind of like that where he refuses to acknowledge him for anything other than just having a pulse, and
Yes.
it's pretty damn
Hmm.
funny to see how that all works out. And I love it when there's a scene later
Hmm.
in the World War III episode where he goes like, I can't believe I have to even waste the breath to say this, but I need your help. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
You're just like,
So
yeah,
I think
oof.
that's which is another like weird part of the Doctor is that he has an arrogance about him, but not arrogance in that he will outright always kind of tell you that he's better than you or something. But like there are ways like he's smart and he enjoys people seeing him being smart, sort of thing. And this is true, honestly, through almost all of the Doctor's modern iterations. At least say for the first three iterations of the series when it came back. But pivoting back to the companion side of this, where we did say like the discredit to Rose is that in this series it's Mickey, then Doctor, and then basically every other episode some generally attractive young British boy shows up that she's all, ooh, maybe this man fits my fancy more, but that the Doctor is still exciting, and she's kind of like emotionally jumping between the two, but ultimately ends up or ends up thinking that the Doctor is the way to go. But other parts of her character that are really, really great, as opposed to this one aspect of the whole thing, is that she is like the Doctor, very, very inquisitive, where she gives basically everyone the benefit of the doubt without mistrusting them right away, but not to the point where she's naive about it, unless she needs to be a little naive for the story to continue, which does happen in one of my more favorite episodes. Is she's naive to a fault, but she does a great job of basically almost representing the human audience watching the show. Is that
Yeah.
compared to this other very fantastic being, um, we we kind of get caught up in the whole situation, the magic of it all, and sometimes don't always think straight because of what's going on around us. And to Rose and the companion, everything is new to her. Everything is amazing to her. Which, I mean, to the Doctor, everything's amazing to the Doctor as well, but for a very different reason. So this is this whole, again, part of our humanity that gets to be viewed through the Doctor's companion.
It's interesting because at first she does show apprehension in joining the Doctor, and
Hmm.
so I think it does kind of help once again put you in the shoes of that person and go, yeah, would I join someone that just fought an army of mannequins that were trying to kill me?
Yeah.
Do I jump into this phone booth and just
Hmm.
decide to go on a time traveling romp? Like it makes sense,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That's the core part of it. It's
Hmm.
sci-fi that like you don't have to have a understand a thesis to know about. You don't have to have a
No.
master's degree to figure it out.
Hmm.
And it's really rooted in like just personal relationships, right?
Yeah.
It, it's
Hmm.
it's it's none of this stuff that you typically get so wrapped into in sci-fi, whether it's these intergalactic wars or even the
Hmm.
technology of what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's really just how people interact with each other, and that's what I think is so easy to consume here. Is that you're just seeing
Hmm.
that, and yeah, and really what I think lends itself really well here is because of that fact,
Hmm.
because there's such an investment in how these characters interact with their environments. The show can be lighthearted at times, and then immediately gets serious or
Yeah.
gets sad or
Hmm.
gets scary, and it can do this sometimes multiple times in the same episode, sometimes the same 5 minutes. I mean, it really does kind of bounce around, doesn't it?
It does, and that's also kind of the fun of the series because when you look at like again like other landmark ones here in the States, like Star Trek is pretty consistent in that it is all just the technology, the humans are the humanity is the crew of the ship, and the ship itself is Earth, and the aliens are the old problems. The ship is solving them with their new wisdom, and this does not really like get caught up in all of that. And I love that you can have sometimes, like you said, like jump from things that are like, terribly funny to just terrifying. And I love that you can do that, as opposed to making it like, again, Star Trek, you may get one episode every other season where it's like, oh, this is going to be kind of a scary episode. We'll do something fun with it. But this is like, no, we're going to stick a horror episode on you in the middle of nowhere every season because we like horror stories. And with Eccleston, I think, in my humble opinion, still has the best of those horror stories, and they didn't do a two-parter. I think it was episodes like 9 and 10. I'm blanking on the first episode, but the second one was called The Doctor Dances. And if you are in the Doctor Who fandom, you'll know this. And even if you're outside of the Doctor Who fandom, you probably know this because you heard someone walking around at a convention saying, "Are you my mummy?" And you were terribly confused by it. So this was another, again, because I think like even before that, it came off a very, I want to say like lighthearted episode, very much like adventure-y and gallivanty, and then boom, horror. And it was such a great, creepy two-part episode of like, again, like this idea of like, I don't know, like anything involving children sometimes just gets really scary in horror movies. So it's surrounding this boy with what appears to have a gas mask on his face, walking around, disrupting radio signals and telephones that shouldn't be ringing are ringing, and he's always on the other end. He's always asking if you're his mummy, and it's just creepy.
And even before that, though, I mean, just episode 3 with the Unquiet Dead, where people are like getting possessed by these spirits, and they're meeting Charles Dickens in the 1800s. Like
very true.
This episode, you get to see. This is once again, this is episode 3 of the series, and both the Doctor and Rose, they're like ready to meet. Like they're ready to expire. Like they're going, "Yep, I think this is where we're going to end this very short journey," and you can see it in their eyes, and you're like, "Holy shit, this is really serious."
Yeah.
and so that's, like I said, 3 episodes in. So they're willing to take some chances here with a combination of traditional sci-fi, where it's just, sometimes technology run wild. Other times it's a very stretchy piece of skin causing things to go amok on an observation deck. But,
moisturize me.
Moisturize me.
Yes.
So
and
dry. So
I
hot.
just love like how they can explore depth with the characters in the show too, especially in this season, where you have Eccleston's Doctor is again charismatic. He's mostly lighthearted. He's always excited to see something new. And then you hit the Dalek episode, which if you've been fans of the series since the 60s, you know that this is like a quintessential like villain for the Doctor. And now we get this mention, which also, by the way, we get this mention of something called the Time War that wiped out the Daleks and wipes out the Time Lords. And it's nowhere. Like, it's not talked about in the movie. It's not talked about, obviously, in the previous series. It's something that happened between the 1996 movie and the 2005 series. But the Daleks are supposed to be gone, and yet here is a Dalek. And because of the extreme history that the Doctor and the Time Lords had with the Daleks, this is the first time you see him terrified. Because in episode 3, he's ready to accept death. He's like, "Oh shoot, this is scary, but I've had my time." But like when he sees the Dalek for the first time, he is turning and screaming and running, and it's legitimate terror. And then when he finds out that like the Dalek can't actually do anything, and it's more or less like physically neutered at that point, and it's just a husk sitting there, you suddenly get this other side of the Doctor that you've never seen before, where he's vindictive and he's vengeful and he's beyond angry towards this thing, and he wants it to die, not like help it, not see if we can get it to go away and just send it back home. He's like, no, he wants the Dalek dead. And we see this, I mean, in this case, kind of a warranted prejudice against a Dalek because of the war that he's been through with them. But unlike anything else that we've seen in the show up until that point, he is willing to literally blow it away when he gets his hands on like a cannon for a little bit there.
Something important to point out, though. Whenever the Time War and the Daleks are kind of referred to, which for those of you who haven't seen one before, they're basically a giant trash can with a metal penis hanging off of it.
Yep,
and
a plunger.
And a plunger. And they say exterminate a whole bunch.
Yes.
But you can see this in other episodes before this point where he kind of makes reference to the Time War. That clearly this guy has had to spend a lot of time thinking about this. He's developed some coping mechanisms where that positivity kind of takes over, and the way that he interacts with other peoples, as you mentioned earlier, like the way that he interacts with people is much different than most of us when we're just meeting strangers or whatever.
Yeah.
For him, it's an actual appreciation for the universe's history and the cultures and observing these things, because he can't do it with his own people anymore.
No.
You know, like this is him kind of imprinting himself on the rest of the galaxies that he's a part of. And so when he does see this Dalek, which he thought was dead, and he came up with all these coping mechanisms, it's all out. It's completely gone. It's all gone. He's almost like a wild animal at that point.
And again,
so
just and to see that, like, again, like, it was refreshing when you didn't need to be refreshed, because the series definitely had not gone stale with what we had seen so far with Eccleston and Piper and their performance together. We even had great tertiary cast members, some of which would come back, I think, to even get their own series, because it was Aliens in London. Our Prime Minister gets her own series, gets her own spin-off show. But we've had great TV so far, and then suddenly, like, they just dial it up and give us something different and something fresh that's in an already refreshing property. So, like, it just gets better and better in this season. Each time you go on, you actually want it to happen more. You're expecting and wanting something new because it's been giving you something new and something exciting. And great takes or great ways of telling their perspective on modern issues through science fiction. So just brilliant. And also, I think, is in the two-parter I was mentioning before with our mummy child going around everywhere, is where we also get another great recurring, semi-recurring role, cast members, where we got Captain Jack Harkness. He came into that two-parter, literally sweeps Rose off her feet at some point in time, again, playing off that whole, does Rose like the Doctor, or is she like the new suave person that showed up? But we get a bunch of great characters that come back and forth in the show, and Jack and Rose all make it to the last episode of the season, which, honestly, heartbreaking if you were really enjoying season one. But
it is. It's very heartbreaking.
Don't want to go into ruining that for you if you haven't checked this out. It is definitely a bombshell, and clearly the show keeps going after that point. But yeah, it was unfortunate what happened, especially if you know anything about the series, of things that happen behind the scene with performers and cast members and other cast members. And I mean, not cast members, but
showrunners,
people on set. Showrunners.
The producers, the big wigs, and we can talk about this a little bit, because Christopher Eccleston doesn't make it beyond this first series. And when I first started watching this, yes, I knew about the David Tennant connection because he takes over for Eccleston after this point. And when I watched series one, everybody had told me, it's like, oh man, Tennant's one of the best doctors that's ever lived. You know, you're gonna love his stuff. And so I'm not saying I went into it going, I want to hate this guy, just to disprove people. But after I saw the really heartfelt performance that Eccleston delivers alongside the charismatic stuff that we talked about, and then weaving in this like really just brutal, almost like PTSD style character, and he hides it. Like, he hides it just like someone with PTSD might do the same. And so, like, seeing him become who he is throughout this first series, I was not ready to say goodbye to him. Not by any stretch of the imagination. No. Frankly, it almost ruined me a little bit.
It did. And like, okay, so we won't tell you exactly how it happens, but the line he gives on his way out. Now, every doctor is going to have kind of their own catchphrase. Not kind of. They legit have their own catchphrase as they go. I got very sick of allons-y very fast, and it wasn't even David Tennant's fault. But yeah, so with 9, with Eccleston, it was fantastic. He says it in every episode multiple times. It's his thing. Yes. When he gets really excited, he says fantastic. And right before he goes, and you're emotionally struck with knowing he's about to go and he's not going to make it, he turns to Rose to say goodbye. And he said, "Rose Tyler, you were fantastic. And you know what? So was I." And then smiles, saves the day, and just, Oh, it was hard because, like, yep, I mean, of the doctors I've seen come and go so far, and granted, like, I will not say I'm a doctor expert. I watched 9, 10, and 11, and after 11, who is my favorite, Matt Smith's performance was my favorite doctor. When he went, I just couldn't. You know it's going to happen. It's a thing. Like, if you're a fan of Doctor Who, you know the actor's not going to stay. They'll get a few seasons or a season and move on. So when you know it's going to happen, it doesn't make it any better. But so when I knew he was gone, I'm like, I'm sorry, Pete, but I just can't. I can't keep going. Matt was my boy. But it sucks. All of them go emotionally. Mm-hmm.
It sucks. It really does, because of course those moments are always an emotional gut punch. No matter what they come up with as the ending, like for that season, it just doesn't matter. There's always a very, very hard to process moment attached to a line that's also equally hard to hear. and that absolutely happened with this when I finally decided to give it a shot, and I just went, oh, why did I do this to myself? You know, but I will say Eccleston's performance truly made me want to go check out more stuff that he did after I watched this series, because it was so inspired. It was so much fun. And as you mentioned, I immediately attached to him. The second he starts talking, even though the music of the pilot episode is a little kooky and it feels, it feels like B-movie video for a little bit. It gets better. It gets much better, by the way. Mm-hmm. But at first, it's kind of like, man, what's going on here? But it just his enthusiasm and what he brought to the role makes the behind-the-scenes stuff that much harder to try to come to terms with, because he's really not. He doesn't regret doing the role. He still has a lot of affinity for what his performance provided to the series, because it did. It helped kickstart this entire reboot. Yep. But there are some things he just can't forgive from the creative side and what he went through, and I respect him for that. I do.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think they were, like, at the time when people found out he was only doing one season, I think he received some, like, harsh feedback from fans and from people watching, because he had done such a great job. Everyone was thinking he was going to come back, and then he goes the first season, and then I'm sure they limited information coming out. They found out he chose to only do one season, and I think people took that as, and he just wasn't a fan of what he was doing, and he wanted to move on and do something different. But like when word came out that basically it was pretty much like it was abuse that was happening behind the scenes, and he wasn't going to put up with it anymore, so he left. When you get that, plus that ending line, like the heartbreaking all around. So, but I mean, the story goes on.
It does, and what's really kind of cool about this is throughout the first season, we're not going to give this away. It's just something to kind of watch for. And there's a lot of imagery that's dedicated to what's called the Bad Wolf. Now, I remember, Joe, knowing about the Bad Wolf when the show came out. I wasn't a big Doctor Who fan, but I knew about this. I will say I hated it seeing Bad Wolf drawn on like a wall somewhere when I'm just walking outside. And I'm like, come on, really? What the fuck is that?
What does that mean?
And even after I watched the show, I was like, don't write that shit somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like somebody just thinks you're talking about some like, some rock band that's opening for an even shittier rock band. Like, don't do that,
No. Yeah.
But as it plays out in the show,
Mm-hmm.
I actually began to grow some appreciation for this because it shows up
Mm-hmm.
throughout the entire series. There's
Mm-hmm.
never really much of an explanation either until you have
Oh.
no choice but to face it. And
Mm-hmm.
so for a series that just got its start again, I thought that was immensely cool that they were able to pull off something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
for one, not have it get leaked because
Yeah.
we're not going to ruin it, but
Mm-mm,
it's
no.
it's a it's a really cool idea, and it takes place across the entire series, and you see it written on stuff. It shows up
Mm-hmm.
in different creative ways, and I thought this did something better than most sci-fi can ever achieve.
Yeah, because I mean, when you say across the series, it's literally like through all of David Tennant's work, it shows
Yeah,
up and comes back, and then you finally get the payoff with David Tennant, and to know that they had started setting that up in Eccleston's season, um, just phenomenal, just incredible, good writing, and again, also great, like you said, the fact that it didn't get leaked on what it was going to be, fucking awesome, just great. Um,
yeah,
to keep a storyline that intriguing going because they could have very much just quickly like, well, people keep wondering what it is, and we finally give it to them and it's a flop, but it wasn't. It wasn't a flop at all. It paid off very well, um,
yeah.
which is very hard to do when you have a lot of hype behind it to actually meet the hype and succeed. Um, so just kudos to that writing staff and that writing team with RCG Davies.
It felt like it was presented, this bad wolf idea. It almost was presented like what
Mm-hmm.
happens in a horror thriller type of movie where you're
Mm-hmm.
never truly given enough to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Like you get an idea, yeah, okay, you can speculate as to what threads could possibly lead back to it,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes you're not given enough until just the minute that it's delivered. And yeah, you could say, oh, well, this meant this back then. And I go, yeah, but there was
Yeah.
no way for you
No.
to know that A equaled, F or whatever, right? Like, there's just no way for you to know that.
No.
Yeah, you can pretend like it in hindsight because you're like, oh yeah, I know that.
Oh yeah,
Fuck
I
yeah, I
it all
knew
along. No,
that.
no, but
I
for all
knew
you knew,
that.
2 + 3 equaled
Yeah.
chair. You dumbass! Like you're making it
Yeah,
up if you said you called it. You knew what was going to happen.
exactly. There's no way you could really call that one.
No.
But
Mm-hmm.
it was a fun little mystery to kind of keep you invested beyond what was already well done. And so
Yeah.
for me, that's what I really think about when I come back to this 2005 series one,
Mm-hmm.
is that it's a very compelling world that they built. They didn't hit you over the head with too much. I feel like you're always getting just enough of whether it's a new species introduced,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. It's usually not too tremendously complicated. And
Yeah.
so that's why I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a great thing to jump in at this point. Don't go back to 1963. Like just
No, too far. Too
see,
far.
see if
I've tried it. It's
2005
too far.
works. Yeah. 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 We've gone too far. We've gone too far.
Yeah, we've gone too
Yeah.
far. No, it's what was it? I feel like it's like the Austin Powers line. Someone's like, no, there's all this time we could go and see it. And I want to see it. And he's just like, no, trust me. A wall came down. There was a flock of seagulls, and that was about it. Like looking back at all the old Doctor Who stuff, like you have to be British or really want to be British to get back into the really old Doctor Who from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So 2005 is a fantastic place to start. And I think that is also, I mean, when what we do on the show and we talk about what a property's legacy is, this one is kind of the most like glaringly obvious, like what its legacy is. It's the fact that the show is still going. I
Yeah.
mean, you're looking at like this show that started in the 60s, took a nap through the 90s, comes back in the 2000s, and worked so well with this first series coming back that it just kept going after that. And it has enough momentum now where even if you have there've been like bad seasons and bad episodes here and there, but the show just keeps going. And I think if you don't have the work of Eccleston and Piper and Barrowman doing as well as they did. John Barrowman was Jack Harkness, by the way. Just before I get too far away from that, since those are the two leads and the closest to well, not even the closest, but the strongest of the recurring characters in this season, show wouldn't keep going. And you get great tropes from the Doctor in this series that just persist. Like the absolute wittiness of every single Doctor that comes afterwards, I think stems from Eccleston's Doctor. The whole, again, like the concept of this Doctor absolutely hating the idea of guns being used and war-like things happening really rings true because of what Eccleston's Doctor experienced that the other 8 Doctors before hadn't yet experienced with the Time War. And God, even like the gut-punching like ending speech or like ending lines that the Doctor gives, I think stem through this Doctor. Like his was powerful. Tennant saying, "I don't want to go," and that's his big thing after he goes around and says goodbye to all of his companions that he had on the show. Matt Smith, who has "I will always remember when the Doctor was me." All these things that felt like basically meta lines because it feels like these are what the actors thought about their time as the Doctor. You had Eccleston, who knows he did a great job with it, and he knows his cast did a great job, which is why you get "You Were Fantastic and So Was I." David Tennant notoriously decided to step down and then regretted it and didn't want to step down, but they'd already signed on Matt Smith. So "I Don't Want to Go" is both David Tennant and the Doctor, and Matt Smith knowing that it's his time to go in the role and move on and do something else, and talking about how he's always going to cherish his time as the Doctor, and that's what rings through the last line. It's just incredible, and this
Matt
is
Smith,
all stuff from Eccleston.
Matt Smith had business to do because he had to go dance in Morbius. Okay, he had to leave the show to be able to have that opportunity. And
he also had to be Skynet.
Yes, he did.
I believe he had to be the King of England for a bit there too, and currently hanging out in Westeros. So Matt Smith, busy man, just doing sorts of things with the big floppy hair that we love him for. Well, but that's the show's legacy is just it keeps going, and the Doctors have been doing things that Eccleston's been doing ever since.
I'm gonna go op-ed for this as we kind of shut things down and go. Doctor Who is a property that the UK had always owned. It was a sci-fi property that the UK appreciated quite a bit. It was uniquely British, uniquely English, however you want to pronounce it, or attach rather. And I think there were many fans at that point that were around the world. In 2005, that all changed. In 2005, once this series premiered, and it paved the way to, like you mentioned, some of these other performances by Tennant, by Matt Smith, this was the point in time where Doctor Who was no longer just the UK's thing. This became a worldwide phenomenon at this point, and I think a lot of people found things in Doctor Who that they think they saw themselves. There were things in Doctor Who that maybe even made them feel better about themselves, right? You can be eccentric, you can have your own style, you can be witty, you can be strange, and the important thing here is to be that person and enjoy life, because that's what Doctor Who does. It's a show that surprisingly makes you feel good about things, despite how bad stuff can go. And it can also cause people to go to Renaissance fairs dressed up as doctors, Joe.
I did not do that. That was not me. It sounded like that was directed towards me. Did I want to? Sure. Did I ever? No. But we know people who have.
I'm saying that because, frankly, that's also another thing that doesn't happen without this show, I don't think. Yeah. And so that's the way I remember it. I remember this as an incredibly well-made show, and it's revered for a reason. So
and to the people who are going to Ren fairs dressed as the Doctor, the first person who did it was a genius. It's played through though. Please stop. Just go to the Renaissance accurate, please, or in regular clothes.
Just like the first person that used a machete to open up a champagne bottle, you don't need to do it anymore. We've seen how it could work.
Yes.
We're not impressed. Well, on the topic of trying things, we always appreciate folks that try out this show and listen to what Joe and I are coming up with on a week-over-week basis. But seriously, your support does go an incredibly long way, and we appreciate you for listening to Digital Dissection. If you do want to reach out to us, though, seriously, we've got ways for you to do that, and we love hearing from you because some people do find this show by accident, we've discovered. So why not drop us a review, leave us a comment on the show, or feel free to write us at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com. We welcome your ideas, and if you've even cosplayed as a doctor at one point, which for some people can be just wearing a suit, which is fine, send it on over to us. We'll take a look.
Yeah.
And anything else you'd like to discuss. And until next time, keep on dissecting.